So anyway, part of the reason I took a hiatus before season 6 is I was kind of avoiding my mistakes. I didn't want to answer for my errors, and I made a major error on this show. I made a prediction that was completely off, and normally I think I'm not a very good predictor. I'll keep it real with you. I'm better at analyzing things that happen, but there's so many things that could happen in the future that I'm not gonna BS you and be like, I can't predict, or I can predict things normally. Sometimes I can. For example, I remember when COVID was first breaking out in China, I remember thinking if this comes to the US, because we still didn't know it was going to be a worldwide thing then, if this comes to the US, it will be worse than all or most countries because our healthcare system cannot tolerate this. It would be a total shit show, and I basically predicted that all right. But anyway, this prediction I made was completely off, and now I must face the consequences. Okay, play the clip. And I will eat my hat if Russia does a full-on land invasion of Ukraine and claims a bunch of their territory. I will literally eat a hat. I will eat a hat live on air. So I want to offer an explanation for my erroneous statement. I really didn't believe Russia would invade Ukraine. I thought it was an error for Russia's reputation, and I thought it was generally a bad idea for Russia. Obviously for Ukraine's it's bad, for the economy, all of that. I just thought it was too bad for too many people, including Russia. And as my listeners know, I am always highly skeptical of the claims of U.S. intelligence, and although U.S. intelligence was telling us Russia would invade, and they were right this time, I still believe very strongly that you will typically be more correct most of the time if you disbelieve U.S. intelligence about foreign countries. But this time, they were right and I was wrong, so now I will literally actually eat a hat live to tape on the podcast. Oh boy, here we go. Oh, that was grosser than I thought. I'm eating a baseball cap, by the way. Oh, I can't believe I'm eating this. Oh, that's nasty. That is not edible. Holy crap. Oh, too much in my mouth at once. Oh, God. Okay, I just have one more bite. Ugh. This part's not as bad. It's softer. It's not as big. Oh, God. Okay. Well, now that I've eaten a baseball hat, I have done my due diligence and fulfilled my obligation to the show. And I'm just going to get into my thoughts on the Russia situation.
I've been asked to talk about Russia, and I might talk about Russia.
Since I've been gone, I'm going to talk about this more generally, like kind of what I think about the thing in general, like how it initially started, the things I have heard people say about it, because, you know, I haven't been here, and I don't want to I can get more specific about what's specifically happening later, if it's still going on, which I hope it's not, but I do not support Russia invading. I feel like it's a fairly egregious invasion, and I do not buy their justifications that Russia gives. I don't think they are doing this to denazify Ukraine. And for me, that goes without saying, but I have to say it because I'm going to say some other things that, it's not enough to say Russia is wrong and unjust for this. In the US, you, need to be foaming at the mouth saying Putin is literally worse than Hitler, or, you'll get smeared as, a Putin supporter. You can't just, tacitly or, you can't just kind of have a nuanced opinion that is still primarily critical of Russia. You have to be like, Russia's the devil.
Russian intelligence, are you mad?
And you also have to act like Ukraine is the best, most perfect, most liberal country ever. Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been elevated to a character in, what I refer to as the Liberal Head Canon. He's up in the Democratic headspace, nay-naying with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Fauci. Now watch me, nay-nay. Now watch me whip. Watch me, nay-nay. And if you don't have this kind of idealized kids' cartoon glorification of Zelenskyy, then you're also kind of presented as a Putin lover. They did that thing where they kind of make a hyper-real caricature of a political figure and treat that person literally mythologized or deified. They almost straight up Christified Zelenskyy. They treat him like a divine figure in this liberal mental palace. And I think of this as the fandomization, fandoms of politics, which is itself kind of a fascist tendency. It's the aestheticization of politics, which is a fascist tendency, and it's creating cults of personalities, a pantheon of personalities, which I also consider a fascistic impulse as well. And that's not to say these liberal Zelenskyites are more fascistic than Putin supporters. I'm not even saying they have fascist beliefs, but rather the way liberals relate to public figures now is part of this kind of fascistic zeitgeist. It's a way of relating to politicians that is characteristic of fascism. But that doesn't mean Zelenskyy or American liberals are ideologically fascist, but in some ways they are, and the way they're relating to politics kind of is. Just to move on from that point, people will literally call you an imperialist if you don't want a hot war between the US and Russia over Ukraine. So, these people know what imperialism is, but they're so disingenuous that they can pretend with a straight face that the US is a defender against imperialism rather than the exemplar, the perfect ideal, the absolute height of imperialism. And as I've already made clear, I do oppose Russia invading, but I don't support the US being involved in the conflict at all. I think we are already too involved, and we definitely shouldn't continue to be more involved. A couple weeks ago now, I remember seeing Joe Biden started sending tanks to Ukraine, and I'm sure they've sent a bunch of other stuff since and before that we don't even realize the scope of. I know that Zelenskyy was requesting an absurd amount of military equipment, dozens and dozens of aircraft a day, literally. Now, I also want to touch on there are accusations of rampant neo-Nazi activity in Ukraine, people will bring up the Azov Battalion, which is a neo-Nazi battalion. It is integrated into the Ukrainian National Guard. I have talked about them on the show before. I don't remember when, probably a long time ago. Anyway, liberals will say stuff like only 10% of the Azov Battalion is even Nazis. And that is just not true. And you know it's not true for a few reasons. For one, that is a claim directly from Azov Battalion spokespeople trying to downplay their own Nazism for legitimacy. And another reason you know that's not true is that their regalia is absolutely covered head to toe with Nazi symbolism. Ask yourself, would you join a battalion that wears Nazi imagery? If you aren't a Nazi, then I imagine the answer would be no. Or, I mean, how could you if you're not a Nazi? Like, that's obscene. And if 90% of the Azov Battalion are not Nazis, why haven't they demanded they remove the Nazi symbols? Like, it doesn't add up. And my last point on the Azov Battalion is I looked at the Azov Battalion Wikipedia page, and this only 10% talking point comes directly from the introduction of their Wikipedia page. And it is a talking point used by like center-left, neocon, warhawk, TV and internet personalities, you know the type. And you know what that means? Even if the only 10% are Nazis talking point was true, it doesn't really matter because the people saying it like have no evidence except Wikipedia, or they are just echoing people who got it from Wikipedia. They don't have insight into what they're arguing. They're just regurgitating the most easy to find things on the internet that support their position. And having said all that, the pro-Russia side does also misrepresent the Nazism of Ukraine. The pro-Russia side acts like Ukraine and the Ukrainian government is overrun with Nazis. And this is not true, although Ukraine does have like kind of more of an issue with Nazism or far-right activism than a lot of countries. Like, it's not any more than the U.S. I'll tell you that. I don't know about Ukraine that well, but I imagine it's on par with a lot of like far right European countries. I guess like Poland comes to mind. Like it's not unique, is what I'm trying to say. And the pro-Ukraine side will counter this representation. So the pro-Russia side says Ukrainian government overrun with Nazis. The pro-Ukraine side will counter by saying the Nazis got like 2% of the vote in the last election. The president Zelenskyy is liberal and Jewish. And both of these positions are misrepresentations. The reality is more nuanced, and the most annoying thing to me is the more nuanced reality of the situation provides arguments to both sides of the argument. Like, if you're being more nuanced, it doesn't undermine one position or the other. It just gives you more rhetorical tools to work with. And so my real issue is by how simplistically this is being presented. Because the reality is, Nazis do not have electoral power. The pro-Ukraine liberals are right about that. But the reason this is a weak argument is Nazis and fascistic forces in society rarely take power electorally. And when they do make electoral gains, these are used hand in hand with other strategies that often overshadow the electoral gains to begin with. Hitler did get elected But he didn't get elected. He got like second most votes and then was appointed chancellor and all this. So he was involved in electoral politics. But that's not really how he came to power. He came to power by utilizing what was probably a Nazi false flag to make him the dictator of Germany and turn it into a one-party state, basically. So my point is, like, it's not common for fascistic groups or Nazi groups to just win an election fair and square and be like, "Oop, there we go, we rule now." Oops. There's a lot more to it than that, and there's a lot more like exertions of power that are more important than the actual electoral element. And Ukraine does have fascist elements integrated into the military, and this is the part of Ukrainian society, the military, that's getting the most support from the US and other European countries. This is what I have major issue with, is like, is there a extreme Nazi problem in Ukraine? No, but it just so happens that the parts of Ukrainian society most infested, I'll use that word, by Nazis. I'll use infested against Nazis. I wouldn't normally use that type of dehumanizing language for other people, but like, that is where American money is going. Okay, so let me just wrap up on Russia stuff. The pro-Russia side of the debate is, frankly, wrapped up in kind of Iraq war, weapons of mass destruction, tier fear-mongering. The arguments about Nazism in Ukraine are overstated, and they do not justify Russia invading Ukraine. But on the other hand, the liberal left does downplay the Nazism and far-right activism in Ukraine, at least a little bit, and I imagine this is largely because they are so, like, election-pilled that they think all politics are our elections, as they also think here in the US. But we know electoral politics is kind of a marginal factor in politics for a lot of countries. And where Nazis have power in Ukraine is the military. And this is especially scary, not because they're likely to win elections, but because Ukraine is an extremely volatile country that's ripe with the potential power vacuums that the far right often fill up. And the reason this should be alarming to Americans is, like I said, this is where our money is going. Our tax dollars are going to the Ukrainian military. So for all we know, we're sowing the seeds for like a future Mujahideen or ISIS in Ukraine. And that is my thoughts on the Russia-Ukraine situation.